Hey, all my IFG friends, this is Steve. I want to say, if you like movies like I do, we've started a new podcast called Happy Hour Flicks. You can find it anywhere podcasts are found. It's all about nostalgic movies that we love, and we bring on special guests each episode, and we also have specialty cocktails made for each one, too. So it really is an hour of a good time talking about movies that we love, like Gremlins, Seven, Free Willy. We talk about The Last Starfighter also. I mean, we kind of run the gamut across all the decades and really have a great time. So wanted to invite you to come over and join us. That's Happy Hour Flicks, anywhere podcasts are found.
This is the
Independent
Filmmakers Guide
from Framework Productions.
Framework
Productions.
Hi, and welcome back to the Independent Filmmakers Guide mini episode. I'm your host, Stephen Pierce. Today I'm talking with an actor best known as Agent Nathan Green on House of Cards, Mr. Sutherland on Mr. Robot, and now as the terrifying forest ranger in the indie horror feature, The Ranger. If you haven't heard our full episode on The Ranger, check it out. So right now I'd like to welcome our incredibly talented guest and my friend, Mr. Jeremy Holm. What's up, Jeremy?
Hey, Stephen. Thanks for having me, man.
No, thanks for doing this. It's always great to get to talk to you. It's been a little while, actually, since we chatted.
You know what I was thinking about? I did a show, a TV show recently with Michael Sheehan, who was in Frost Nixon.
There you go.
And you and I were also in Frost Nixon at the St. Louis Rep so long ago.
That's it.
Remember that?
Yeah, definitely. That's how we met. I wasn't in it. I was sitting behind the table. I had a lot less glamorous position.
But you were behind the camera in one of the scenes with the camera, and now you're behind the camera in another scene with a camera.
Hey, it was destiny. Just right from the beginning, it was destiny.
It's so cool.
Yeah, that was it was a great experience for me. Honestly, it was the first time I just graduated from Webster, and I got an acting degree, and I knew I wanted to direct at that point. And Steve Wolf was the director of that, and also artistic director of the Rep in St. Louis. And he was
great guy.
Yeah, great guy, really good guy. I mean, he supported me a lot throughout my career, and even with that, that was my first real AD job, something that I could really say, hey, here's something that someone knows what the hell it is. And so that was a really, really fortunate opportunity. It was a really fun thing for me too. It was the first time I ever got to give notes to professional actors, and Steve would I'd hand him a Post-it note with a note on it, and he'd read it, and then sometimes he'd give it or sometimes he wouldn't, and then he'd tell me why afterwards. But the fun part was always watching a professional actor take a note that I'd get, and I was always so nervous and just so anxious about how they were going to respond, and am I totally messing this up? And so
I'm sorry if I didn't take your notes. I hope I
did. You never took any
But
notes, which is why I brought you here today to drag you over the coals. This is retribution. Full on retribution.
Fair enough. It all comes back, man.
So, Jeremy, how did you get started? Actually, you got your BA at Colorado State University, and then you got your MFA, right?
Yeah, at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and then I took a few years off. I lived in London. I saw a lot of theater, and then I came home and I started auditioning for graduate schools, and then after graduate school, I moved to New York and I got an agent, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of hard work, a lot of pounding the pavement, a lot of waiting tables in between, and a long journey. But here we are.
I mean, was that really the course for you? Was it's more of a marathon, less of a sprint, or did you find success right away?
Well, I thought I was going to, but within a month of my moving to New York, I booked an episode of Law and Order, just an under 5. And, but it was a scene with Jerry Orbach and Richard Belzer. And it was a double episode with Homicide, Life on the Streets, and Law and Order. And Ed Sheeran directed, who's a legend in the business. And I only had one little scene, but it was then that I realized I had full training as a theatrical stage actor, and I'd had a lot of experience, but I had no idea how to be in front of a camera. And it took me a long, long time to start to learn how to do that. And I always feel like I'm at the beginning, no matter what I'm doing. There's always so much to learn. And it is a marathon. It's a long road. And just like running a marathon, which I used to do, You might feel like giving up. You might wonder why you're doing it, but you always know there's a reason to keep running. And whenever I'm like during COVID, that's what I've been thinking about is how I can be better, what I should be watching. I've been reading a lot. I just finished my second read of For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. Yep. And if you ever want a great description of meeting your own death, read that book, man. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you're talking about your like lifelong journey of like learning, especially in front of the camera. I mean, a lot of your work is theatrical or has been theatrical. You've been on BAM, Cherry Lane Theater, lots of regional work. Do you approach a role differently for film versus theater?
Well, you know, when you're doing theater, you have a lot more rehearsal time and you're preparing alone and with people. So when you're, you know, before rehearsal, I would usually spend a couple hours before rehearsal going over whatever scenes we were going to rehearse that day. And then after rehearsal, I would again go over those same scenes. And then I'd take a break. And then that night before I went to bed, I'd work on whatever was going to be up for the next day. And then I'd get up the next day and work on it before rehearsal. So there's a lot more rehearsal time. When you're doing film and TV, sometimes you get the job the day before you're shooting. So you really don't have the luxury of all that rehearsal. So you have to have a process and a technique and a really ramped up, speedy way to get ready for stuff. You also have to know the amplitude you can use for the camera versus stage. And then also you have to be ready to completely throw out whatever you thought it was when you hear the director's going a completely different direction. So they're two different beasts. But in terms of the text analysis and the imagination, it's the same muscle.
So whenever you like day play, so like, one of your roles on House of Cards, how many days would you typically, or your role in House of Cards, how many days would you typically shoot in an episode?
It varied. You know, some of the episodes I was only in one little scene. So I'd go down for 3 days. I'd go down the day before, I'd shoot the scene and then go home the day after. Sometimes I was down there for 3 weeks at a time because I was in a bunch of situation room scenes and they were long, 16-hour days. And I had White House scenes and situation room and a hallway or a car. So I'd be down there for 2 or 3 weeks at a stretch. So, it just depended on the script and how much Nathan was in each of those scripts.
Right. So I guess it's kind of easier, I suppose, once you develop a recurring character and you're on a series like House of Cards that has a set tone and it kind of has the same mood to realize what movie you're in. I mean, or what show you're in, right? Yeah,
that's true. And also you're more comfortable because, like I'm still good friends with Lorenzo Milan, who was the sound guy who won, Emmys for his work on that show. And I was friends with the makeup folks and the best boy and the first grip and everybody. And so it's a family situation. And by the time we wrapped the last season, it was really sad to go because you're going to miss all these people, who their kids are and when their birthdays are and what their favorite thing to eat is. And, their family. I still send Michael Kelly a birthday gift. Every May when his birthday comes around because he's such a good dude.
But if you're on like an independent film or like your first day on a show like Law and Order, well, Law and Order also kind of the same tone. But what I'm digging at here is how do you collaborate with the director? What conversations are you having to figure out what the tone is, how to gauge your performance? Is this supposed to be more light or am I supposed to be a total asshole? Am I supposed to be more realism based and like justifying my actions? Like, how do you establish that relationship?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, when you read the script, there are a lot of clues right there. The pace, the mood, the tone, the mise en scene that they're probably going to use. So that's your first clue. Then you look at the production team and you can kind of see from their lineage other stuff they've done. So what ball field you're going to be playing in. Then a huge part of it for me, and I think for many actors, is the costume fitting. That's really going to tell you a lot about what that particular human moves like in their costume and what they look like in their costume and how they feel in it. And that's going to determine a lot of physical things that happen, once you get to set.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a very short acting career where I did just some regional stuff and I did a couple shows of the Rep. But the thing that always would indicate to me the most about how I was going to do the character was the shoes. I don't know what it was, but always when I put the shoes on that I was going to be wearing, somehow it really gave me an angle about how it felt to move as that character.
You and Laurence Olivier, he was a big shoe guy too.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, shoes and noses. He always had a fake nose for all his roles, and he was big on the shoes. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the indie films you've worked on. And back in the beginning, were you ever doing anything when you're trying to translate what you learned on stage to film? Did any directors ever give you any real strong insight in being like, yo, do this or pull it back or do something like that? Anything that's ever stuck with you about your process?
What's interesting is by the time you get to set, you maybe have met the director in the audition room, maybe, and you've maybe chatted with them a little bit. But more often than not, like when I did the movie The Judge, I never met the director. And even after I was on set, I spoke to him for maybe 3 minutes, right? Because the director's job is so big. They're dealing with, 5 different unions and a production schedule and money. And they're dealing with the cinematographer and all these egos and everywhere. So really, you're kind of alone. You're doing what you're going to do. I did have a great director on House of Cards for a number of episodes. And his name is Alex Sakharov. And one time Solikov. And he said, it was a car scene. We were looking over a car. Me and Stamper were looking at each other over a car. And he said, I don't know, it's the moonlight. Maybe there's a glance, someone. Like he just said, maybe there's a glance, someone. And he didn't say what he wanted me to do. He didn't tell me how to do it. He didn't tell me when to do it. He just wanted me to introduce some doubt thought in one part of it. He didn't care which part. And he knew he was going to use whatever that gesture was as a cutaway point. So he had it so planned out in his mind about how he wanted the scene to have some mystery. He knew he needed that specific 3 seconds. And great directors often will make their editing work easier by knowing the ins, the cut-ins and the cutouts, when they're going to transition, when they're going to do the reverse. And the best director always have the fewest setups, like Sam Esmail. He knows what he's going to see. And so a lot of his scenes, if you ever watch Mr. Robot, are one-shots. And it's just a great, really talented camera crew and DP. And they get it all done in one, amazing shot. And that will inform the actor as well. It means you need to be efficient. It means you need to know where your frame is and, what you can achieve when the camera's on you and when it's off you, so you can move to the next spot when the camera pans back to you. So it's all, a lot of technical stuff. As far as, notes I've been given or advice I've been given from directors, be willing to fail. But show up ready, show up prepared, and don't be late.
Whenever you approach a film like The Ranger, whenever you're going to work on that, what kind of background work are you doing, and how do you bring that to set? What are you looking to the director and the writer to give you versus what are you looking to bring? Is it always the same?
It's never the same. Every project has its own personality. It's like meeting a new person. The Ranger was a new person, and I started introducing myself to that entity just by reading the script a lot. And Jaco Farino, who wrote it, we had actually worked together before. And when he was rewriting it and working with Jen Wexler, who was a co-writer and the director, they kind of knew that I was going to play the role. And he kind of wrote to me, and he knew me pretty well. So a lot of the humor in the film is based on my, personality in some ways. So I would read the script a lot. Then once I read the script and I learned the scenes and what the beats in the scenes were and what was to be achieved in each scene, Then it was a matter of being, able to play on set and figuring out what tone and energy and pace Jen was looking for so that I could try to be in that world. Also, though, sometimes you have to say, I don't even care about any of that. I just need to do what I want to do, right? So there's a real tug of war between, just being an artful actor and doing what you want to do and receiving all this information that's coming at you from, you got to stand here, the lighting's coming from this way, the camera's panning across you, make sure you turn on, all that technical stuff. You need to know when it's okay to throw it away. And so there's that. When you're working on indie films, the pace is always faster because there's less money, as you well know. And so the more prepared you are and the more you can guess what someone's going to ask you to do before they ask you to do it, the more time you can save. And maybe if you save that time, you'll get an extra take out of it. Maybe.
So speaking about the scale of them, like what is the schedule? Like if you can kind of compare and contrast your experience on big sets versus independent sets and the way that affects your performance.
Right. Well, so big sets, there's a lot more waiting. There's more pressure. There's more money. There's more ego. So you have to be willing to stay calm in that environment, because you could be in your trailer for 6 hours and then suddenly they call you and you got to go when they call you. You got to be on point when ready to go when they call you, and not let, an ego like Kevin Spacey push you off your spot, or, whatever it is. You have to just do the job. And it's not it's like putting bread in a toaster. You have to approach it that way. It's not a big deal. No one's dying. You're just doing a job. So that's big set. You're waiting a long time, but there's a lot of pressure. And there's more money involved. So the pressure is even amplified. On more independent films, you have to take care of a lot of those little details yourself. And you have to be thinking about continuity more. You have to be thinking about ways to save the production team time and money by asking good questions before you start. Like, if we shoot this now, we can shoot the next scene also here before we move. It's just a quick costume change, which I could do, very quickly, and we could get that coverage, and then we pop back to the other costume, and then we move everything. You can save an hour at a time doing stuff like that. Also, you have more input in if you think there's a necessary line change. There's not a whole retinue of a writing team that you'd be insulting by asking if you can change a word here or a word there. Also, they want you to be more artistic because you are a big part of the creative team. Whereas on a big movie, you're not involved in the development of that project for years and years and years. And so you're not going to say anything. You're just going to say what they told you to say and how they told you to say it. Tends to be a little, the artistry of it is different. It's, on an indie film, you get to be more of an artist, I think. Although the artist in me wants to argue against that and say, you're always an artist. You always have input. And you do. But you have to pick your moments. You can't just assume it's always going to go that way. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And the camaraderie on indie films it's so fun. So whenever you're doing scenes that do have a lot of coverage, so they have like a lot of different angles and a lot of different, so like a dinner table scene or a scene that's going to have a lot of, big moving master and then a lot of individual inserts. How do you pace yourself to make sure you're ready for your shot without leaving your other actors hanging when it's their moment? Okay. So here's a little secret. If I'm in a scene like that has a lot of coverage and props and I'm standing, if you watch stuff, and this is kind of a secret of mine, I almost always have one hand in my pocket because that's 50% less that I have to remember. It's just easier. It's just easier, man. Less stuff that you can mess with and play with and less gestures. Yeah. And if there's a prop, I try to get that motherfucker out of my hands as fast. Oh, can I swear on this? Yeah, it's fine. Okay. I try to get that thing out of my hands as fast as possible. And that's not entirely true, but I always try to hook it to, the use of props needs to be hooked to something that you're doing. either for an overt or a covert reason. If it's overt, it's in the text, or if you want to suggest something subliminally, you might, if you want to dismiss someone, you might take off your hat and hang it up while you're talking to them, just to give them a little thumb, a little finger. But it has to be for a reason. You have to remember you did it. So 4 hours later, when you got to do it again in a different shot that they added on afterwards, you remember to go, yeah, I know, we were talking about that, weren't we? And you take off your hat and you take it off with the same hand. You don't, for some reason, grab it with the other hand and do this. You do what you did the first time, right? Little things like that, if you're not paying attention, can really get you not hired the next time, because the editor's like, sorry, I can't use that. There's no continuity. We're going to have to cut out early. It'll look weird. He's holding the drink in the other hand now. Here's another little tip. So if I had a glass of water, this is obviously not a glass of water, but if I have a glass of water that's this full, right, and we're going to do a lot of coverage, and I take a drink, I don't drink anything. I pretend, I act it so that the level is the same, so the props guy doesn't have to continue. And there are times when that's obviously, you can't do that.
Well, you can't do that, but yeah.
Right. But when you can do it, help the production team out. So there are little things like that on the long days with the massive coverage. You're free a little bit because, if they're going to do a lot of coverage, they're also going to do a lot of takes. And so you need to modulate your performance. So you give them A, B, C, D, E, and F so that they can pick and choose. And if you keep your movement the same, right? If you keep your movement the same every time, but you modulate the rest of your performance, then they can pick and choose as they go through each setup and each take, and they can build it. They can go down, they can go up in energy, they can do whatever they want because you've given them that range of choices within the scene. So you got to think about all that stuff, and it's all game time decisions, because they might be up against a tough deadline on the day and they're giving you one take. And if you get the lines right, they're moving on. So I always think the first take should be a middle of the road, really good, crisp, clean, verbatim take. No extra movement, just a good, clean, solid take. That way, if they have to move on, they can, right? So, but then if they have time and they can add extra stuff, you can give them little wrinkles. The director might say, okay, like the last note I was given on, I did the good fight, and the director said, okay, ratchet it down a little on this one, Jeremy, which I did. So that's great to get that. Then when you move to a new setup, you got to go back to one and say, okay, now I'm modulating. I'm going to do one good, solid, clean, middle of the road take. And then if they give me more takes, then I can, start to play a little bit. So on your question on the scenes with a lot of coverage, you want to help the editor and the director by giving them those choices. But the first choice should be a really good, solid choice.
Yeah, I mean, and we thank you for that. Like, actors that remember their continuity is extremely beneficial. I mean, it sounds like kind of like you're almost doing parts of the role of the director to me, because in theater, when I direct theater, I can't control how you're going to feel. Especially, I can't control how you're going to feel an hour and 15 minutes from now on stage. So what I always try and do is stage in little actions like that, things I can control. What you do with props, the way you cross towards somebody when you sit down, how you move. I can control through physical actions to try and engage some kind of emotional response. So it seems like you're kind of doing that within your scenes, even where you're taking your hat off to dismiss somebody. You're giving yourself physical motivation to help tell the story that you don't have to manufacture it. It literally tells the story in and of itself.
That's right. And also, when you do things like that, you can remember them 3 hours later. And that's a huge part of acting in film and TV is being efficient so that people can make a profit. It's a business, right? They want to make a profit, and they don't want to have another day tagged on because they're paying 30 people $100 an hour plus whatever else,
right,
other costs there are.
So what about if you have like a super high emotion scene? I'm thinking like a really tense scene with somebody, and it's really high energy. You're yelling, you're right in somebody's face. It's a fight. How do you gauge your energy level to make sure you don't emotionally exhaust yourself before it's the right take? Is that a communication thing? Also, do you say, how much am I doing this? So
So I have two examples for you. I recently did an episode of Prodigal Son, and I had a scene with the lead in the show and Lou Diamond Phillips, and it was a scene. I played the serial killer, and it was a scene where the serial killer is experiencing remorse and glee, and he's out of his mind, and there's tears and laughter in the scene, like it's all over the place. And I always, when you're a guest star, the star gets the close-up coverage last because it gives them a little more time to learn, because they're doing a lot more work than you. They have big scenes all day long every day. So they always give them the later coverage so they have a little more time to prepare and to, get used to the scene. So I knew that once we did the wide, it was going to be on me. I knew that. And so I also, when they put it on me, I knew that I could take my time within the take to let whatever I needed happen. So I slowed down Jeremy, the actor, so that the character could let happen what needed to happen. And so I think it worked pretty well. There are other times, like I did this movie Silo a few years ago, where I was inside of a grain bin, and a guy's drowning in corn, and there's a very emotional, scene. And I knew I only had maybe 2 takes. I knew I had 20 minutes, and it was a big jib, and there was it was really
lots of money, lots of pressure on you.
Yeah, it was tough. And so I just think simple is always better in those. It's always better to do less, even though I, as a human being, as I'm always tempted to do more. And I actually, when I watch it, I'm like, I could have done less. And the other thing that I did to prepare myself and be ready for that was, I just made sure, I told the director, I said, I'm going to go find a different place. Just I want to be alone. I don't want anyone talking to me, And then right before I did the scene, someone who wasn't involved directly with the production came up and tried to talk to me, like right as we were about to roll. And I just walked away. And I didn't want to be rude, but I was like, I'm not even going to say I'm sorry. I'm just walking away.
On that, are you an amp up sort of person? Do you like music and get really like tense to it? Or are you one of those people that like to throw it away and kind of like joke and laugh and be, or just think about other things right until go and then snap in?
It depends on the project. I can tell you that, for instance, Kevin Spacey and even Robin Wright, they're both like joke around, throw it away people. Christian Slater's the same way. But there are other actors who are not that way, who are like, they're in it the whole time. Like Jeremy Strong is an actor who's in it the whole time. Even when he's not, you could be at lunch and he could be a jerk to you because he's a jerk to your character, which I think is weird and unnecessary. But, some people are like that. And I think it also depends on the role. Like different roles demand a different process. But I also, another point on this, I think it's always important to have common decency and to remember that all the other people there are more important than you are. You're just an actor. They could replace you with just about anybody. And everybody there is working towards a common goal to make something exciting and beautiful. And at the end of our lives, we just die. We don't get to take any of this money. We don't get to take away any of this stuff. What we leave behind are how we affected the people we were with, and how much love we gave to the world. That to me is the major point. You don't get to be a dick to people just because you can. It makes no sense to me.
Right. I think that goes well beyond actors. I think having healthy humility, and if you can't be a decent person, like, and work with them, you're not, in my opinion, not someone I want to work with. Like, even if you are extremely good, you have to be so good if you're an asshole. Like, I mean, you just have to be beyond good for have any interest to work with you. So
I would argue that it's never justified. Even if you're a genius, it's still not justified.
It's also just unnecessary. You know, I love one of the things you said is like just doing simple and do less and do less. That is something that a constant note I find myself giving and trying to constantly work with people on, and myself whenever I perform. And it's really hard to learn that lesson, that you are enough. As a performer, you already bring a whole lot of energy, a whole lot of stuff. If you can just exist and not add, not manipulate, that's so much of it. Yes.
And it takes a lifetime to get good at that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, this has been a lot of fun. Honestly, I love getting to catch up with you and talk about all the projects. I could talk for hours about this.
For me too, man. Thank you.
Filmmaking is a collaborative experience, and so is this podcast. So be sure to follow us on Instagram for all upcoming episode announcements at framework_productions. There, you can also leave your questions and comments for our guests and for any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Subscribe to Independent Filmmakers Guide wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a rating and let us know how you like the show with a review. It really is helpful. And if you'd like to read the credits for an episode, call us at 347-871-1559 and leave us your email.
Hi, I'm Ellis. And I am Sagan. And we are reading the credits for this episode about our dad. IFG is produced by Framework Productions and directed by James Allerdyce. It's produced by Matt Mundy, edited by Audrey Rae McHale, and hosted by Stephen Pierce.
The music is by Glassboy.
Find his music on freemusicarchive.org.
Thanks for listening!
Hey friends, we just wanted to take a quick moment to talk about two personal things. First, we wanted to thank you, our listening community, and our wonderful guests, learning so much together along the way and continuing to learn, sharing our stories, making a lot of new friends, and collaborating, which is exactly what this is all about. Which also brings me to my second point. In great part to many of these new relationships, we wanted to let you know that we've taken a lot of this advice ourselves and made our own narrative feature film, Herd, H-E-R-D, Herd, which is premiering this October on Friday the 13th in select theaters as well as on VOD. Personally, I think it's the perfect kind of scary movie to watch during our favorite scary season. So we'd love for you to celebrate with us and watch Herd. You can pre-order it on Apple TV, and of course, do the communal thing, see it in theaters. Of course, for all of this, please see our show notes, but basically, we're going to keep it all updated at herd.film. That's HERD.FILM, herd.film as well. Thank you again, and be sure to give us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcasts so we can continue to build this community and collaborate. IFG, how movies get made.